Over the last 50 years, Kenya has made some remarkable progress. We have emerged not only as a leader on the racetrack, but also as a leader in the race to achieve health and development goals. Mortality for children under 5 has fallen to 74 deaths per 1,000 live births today. We have recorded tremendous progress in education. Almost 90% of our children of primary school age are attending school. Life expectancy at birth has increased. The average Kenyan can now expect to live more than a half a century. And we are now wealthier with a steadily increasing gross national income. Now let us take a closer look at the trend in income growth. Here we have a trend graph where we can look at changes and trends over time. And we're going to focus on the gross national income in Kenya. On the left axis, we have the gross national income per person. This is standardized for what a US dollar can buy today in the country. It ranges from $0 to $1,800. On the bottom axis, we have time going from the mid-1970s until 2005. And here is Kenya in 1975 with a gross national income of about $350 per person per year. This is about 26,000 Kenyan shillings. Now let us play this forward and see how GNI has changed over time. And you can see that income starts increasing right away. Progress wavers over time, but when we come to 2005, there is a substantial increase of up to about $1,230. This is about 92,000 Kenyan shillings. It means that we have 3.5 times the purchasing power per person today than we did 3 decades ago. As Kenya's GNI increased, the percentage of families living in poverty went down from 54% to 46%. But this is almost 1 out of every 2 families still living in poverty. In fact, even though the percentage of Kenyans living in poverty has slightly dropped, the total number of people in poverty has increased. Looking at this graph, we see that in 1999, the population of Kenya was 28.7 million. 54% of the population, or about 15 million people, were living in poverty. Now, in 2009, the population of Kenya increased to approximately 39 million. And the proportion of people living in poverty is 46%. That equals about 18 million people. This means that the total number of people living in poverty in Kenya has actually increased by 2.5 million over the last 10 years. How can we reduce poverty in Kenya's families? One way is by addressing the reproductive health needs of the families with the special focus on women. Research has established that reproductive health services improve the health of women, boost social and economic development, and contribute to reducing poverty. In fact, women's economic contribution to the country is crucial to poverty reduction. Today, women make up about 44% of the labor force. When women are not healthy, the country suffers. When women cannot choose how many children to have and when to have them, then they are more likely to have many children, suffer from poor reproductive health, and it becomes harder for them to earn an income and meet the needs of their families and the nation. In Africa, Kenya was an early leader in focusing attention on women's health, especially through family planning. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, Kenya's family planning program was broad, comprehensive, and successfully reached all types of people in both urban and rural areas. During this time, many leaders spoke out in support of family planning. With our bubble graph, we can see the progress that Kenya made. Here on the left axis, we have the lifetime number of births per woman ranging from 0 to 8.5. On the bottom, we have the percentage of married women using any form of family planning ranging from 0 to about 60%. Starting way back in 1978, Kenya had nearly 8 births per woman and about 7% of married women were using family planning. When we put the graph in motion, we see that fertility starts dropping right away. As family planning use increases, the average number of births per woman is coming down. And when we come to 2009, we see that Kenya has made dramatic progress. About 46% of married women are using any form of family planning, and the average births per woman is 4.6, which means between 4 and 5 births per woman. But if we zoom in and look carefully, we see that these trends were not always steady. In fact, from 1998 to 2003, the average number of births per woman actually increased from 4.7 to almost 5. And the family planning use stalled. Why did this happen? Well, we know there were many reasons for the stall. The HIV epidemic diverted everyone's attention. Donor funding for family planning declined as donor resources were also channeled to HIV. And leadership for family planning in Kenya was diverted to other challenges. All these caused disruptions in service provision and loss of momentum in outreach programs, and the family planning program in Kenya was weakened. When we compare Kenya over time with some other countries, we can see how much momentum was lost due to that stall in the late 1990s. Here now, we are looking specifically at Kenya and Morocco and comparing the changes in fertility in both countries on our trend graph. On the left axis, we are still looking at the average number of births per woman ranging from 0 to 8.5. On the bottom, we have time in years going from 1970 to 2009. The start year is 1973, and you can see that Kenya and Morocco have almost the same number of births per woman. On average, a woman in Kenya had 8 births in her lifetime, while in Morocco, it was about 7. As we put this in motion, we see that both countries made very steady progress right away. We should note that in both countries, the political leadership strongly supported family planning from the early 1970s, and community-based distribution programs were a central part of family planning service delivery. These contributed to their rapid and steady decline in fertility. By 1998, Kenya's fertility had dropped from 8 to 4.7, while for Morocco, it had dropped from 7 to about 3. We also mentioned that by 1998, attention for family planning in Kenya was diverted to other issues. Funding, leadership, and outreach programs for family planning had waned. The community-based distribution programs had also weakened. On the other hand, in Morocco, the leadership for family planning remained strong. In the mid-1990s, the government increased investments in family planning by starting to finance contraceptives rather than relying on donor support. When we continue forward, we can see the difference this made. Morocco continued on the same path, steadily reducing unmet need for family planning and reducing fertility all the way to less than 2.5. For Kenya, we see the fertility transition stall. Fertility now stands at an average of 4.6 births per woman, almost the same as it was 10 years ago. One of the reasons why Kenya has not been able to continue reducing fertility has to do with the unmet need for family planning. In Kenya, 1 out of every 4 women says that she would like to delay her first birth, space her next child by at least 2 years, or not have any more children, and yet she's not using any form of contraception. This is what we refer to as unmet need for family planning. And unmet need can lead to large numbers of unplanned pregnancies. More than 1 million Kenyan women become pregnant every year without planning to have a child at that time. One desperate consequence of these unplanned pregnancies is unsafely performed abortions. This figure illustrates the relationship between contraceptive use and abortion in several countries. Look at the relationship you see as a percentage using modern contraception increases, the abortion rate goes down. That means that fewer abortions are taking place. For the case of Kenya, which is in the green bar here, abortion is only legal to save the life of the mother. But data suggests that there are still some abortions happening. And when compared to the other countries in the figure, Kenya has relatively higher contraceptive use and fewer abortions taking place. But just think of how many more abortions could be averted if Kenya's contraceptive use were to increase to meet the unmet need for family planning that already exists. Another consequence of so many unplanned pregnancies is high-risk births. That is, a woman having children when she is too young, too old, or a woman having too many children, or children too closely spaced together. In these cases, there is increased risk to the health and life of both the mother and child. This contributes to Kenya's very high rate of maternal deaths. Kenya's maternal mortality ratio is estimated at 414 deaths per 100,000 live births. This translates to more than 8,000 deaths every year. The Millennium Development Goal is to reduce maternal deaths in Kenya to below 200 per 100,000 live births by the year 2015. Increasing family planning use is therefore one important step towards reaching that goal. And finally, these unplanned pregnancies contribute to high fertility and families having more children than they had planned. Now, some people may argue that Kenya wants big families and that it is our culture and tradition to have many children. In light of this argument, it is interesting to take a historical look at Kenya's population growth. We see that throughout most of Kenya's early history, the population remained very low, like in many countries around the world. Historical demographers estimated that in the year 1700, Kenya's population was around 2 million. It took more than 200 years until past the year 1900 for the population to double at around 4 million. From there, it took less than 50 years for the population to double again to about 8 million by 1960. Thereafter came what is known as the 20th century population explosion, which happened all around the world. This was attributed to many factors, including improvements in public health services such as vaccinations, antibiotics. And Kenya's population has shot up to around 39 million today, even with so much loss of life with HIV and AIDS. Since the time Kenya attained its independence in 1963, large families have been often seen as an asset. But now the needs of our nation have changed, and this asset is likely to become a liability if we do not manage it well. Given Kenya's high number of births per woman today, the population will continue to climb very rapidly. At our current growth rate, the population could nearly double from 39 million to 72 million by 2030. That is almost twice as many people in just one generation. And this growing population has brought about some amazing changes, especially in our cities. Some of you might recognize this picture taken back in the 1960s. It is Valley Road, looking into downtown Nairobi from the hill. You can see a few cars and some orderly traffic. And here are our roads today. A typical daily commute in Nairobi. It's one of the challenges that we face as we struggle to improve our infrastructure to keep pace with the needs of our rapidly growing cities. Let us now turn to the Google Earth satellite map. And we are taking a bird's eye look at Kenya from above. We will zoom all the way into downtown Nairobi. You can see the Kenyatta Conference Center in the middle of your screen. Moving away from the city center, as we pass over the Upper Hill neighborhood towards the Kenyatta National Hospital, we begin to appreciate how Nairobi has grown from the city of only 250,000 residents in 1960 to about 3 million residents today. We know that our cities have always been crowded. But as we move towards Kibera, and you see the crowding, people living closer and closer together under conditions where the city is not able to adequately provide access to safe water and sanitation. But this crowding is not limited to our cities. It's also there in the rural areas. Moving over to Kisii in Nyanza, we see the same type of crowding here too. Population is expanding, but land is not expanding. Family farms are becoming smaller and smaller with time. This is putting pressure on each generation and creates conflict and competition for scarce resources. If these farms are subdivided again for the next generation, will our children be able to raise the crops to sustain their families? But we have sometimes heard that a fast population growth can increase per capita GDP. This argument can only hold if you have a healthy workforce, enough jobs, educated workers, and modern infrastructure in several sectors. The growing population means more people in need of social services, and that means building more schools and expanded healthcare facilities. These are services that the government will be expected to provide. All these will put pressure on the government's budget and may crowd out other spending and investments. This could mean slower economic growth for the country. How will we achieve our Vision 2030 if the population continues to grow so rapidly? We need to manage the population growth so that economic growth can catch up. Family planning is the missing link to achieving these development goals. And we can start by meeting the reproductive health needs of Kenyan women to enable them to better plan and space their children. Increasing contraceptive use will reduce unintended pregnancies, unsafely performed abortions, and high-risk births. This will save the lives of both mothers and children. At the same time, parents will also be able to have the number of children they desire and invest in food, clothing, education, and health for each child. You remember those family planning messages we used to hear, small family for better living? This will improve the quality of life. When the family is healthier, they are better placed to contribute to the economy. This will start to break the cycle of poverty in Kenya. It can be achieved in a short time. Investing in family planning will help Kenya to reach the key Millennium Development Goals of reducing maternal death and reducing poverty. In 2005, the government of Kenya took an important first step to establish budget line item on family planning. And if Kenya were to increase that investment to 5.3 billion Kenya shillings so as to meet the current needs for family planning, then that investment would translate into savings. These savings are possible because as women have fewer children, the government will spend less money to meet the needs of the population. The government can then save money on costs related to education, immunization, water and sanitation, maternal health, and malaria. You can see that we can save more than we spend. In fact, by the year 2015, we will have saved over 20 billion Kenya shillings. The cost savings that we gain in these 5 areas, which are all instrumental in meeting the Millennium Development Goals, outweigh the additional costs of family planning by a factor of almost 4 to 1. A lot is possible for Kenya's economic future. This is the type of progress we have been seeing in many countries that have been able to manage their population growth. So going back to our bubble graph one last time, we talked about gross national income in Kenya at the start of this presentation. This time, we are going to look at it a little differently. We will focus on the whole world. We are again looking at the number of children per woman in the left axis, ranging from 0 to about 8.5. On the bottom axis, we have gross national income per person ranging from $200 to about $40,000. The bubbles on the graph are countries, and the size of the bubble corresponds to the population size of the country. The color indicates the region. Starting with the red, we have East Asia and Pacific. Orange is Central Asia and Europe. Yellow represents the Americas. Green is the Middle East and North Africa. The light blue is South Asia, and dark blue is for Sub-Saharan Africa. Let us take a look at a few of these countries. The big red bubble here is China, with 4 births per woman and about $230 gross national income per person in 1975. The orange are European and Central Asian countries, clustered at the bottom right with few children per woman and high gross national income per person. The dark blue is Sub-Saharan Africa, clustered at the top left with many children per woman and low income. Kenya is here, near the back of the pack, with nearly 8 births per woman and a GNI of only about $350. As we observe the trends over time, we see that as women have fewer and fewer children, the bubbles move down. Gross national income per person increases as the countries move to the right. When we get to the year 2005, all the countries of the world have moved from the top left-hand corner towards the bottom right-hand corner. The world is really a very, very different place. Although the sub-Saharan African countries have made progress, they still have many children per woman and low gross national income per person. Where is Kenya now? Here is Kenya. with between 4 and 5 children per woman and a gross national income of more than $1,200 per person. You can see that Kenya is one of the leaders among those dark blue sub-Saharan African countries. We had earlier compared Kenya with Morocco. You can see here that Morocco has lower fertility and GNI of over $4,500. We can also see that some sub-Saharan African countries, such as Namibia and Botswana, are also doing very well with low fertility and high economic growth. One of the reasons why many of these countries have been able to make so much economic progress is that women started having fewer children. This set the stage for the country to better manage its population growth and hence reduce the constraints on economic growth. However, this kind of economic progress is not automatic. It requires a series of investments, including expanding family planning programs so women and couples can plan and space their children, investing in health systems to improve child survival and health in general, improving educational enrollment, especially for girls, so as to close the gap between boys and girls' education, and stabilizing economic conditions to create more jobs and make sure that these are economic opportunities for young men and women. Stabilizing economic conditions is a very critical issue for Kenya because youth unemployment is already a major problem. In order to achieve our Vision 2030 goals, a reinvestment in family planning is needed. In today's financially strapped environment, family planning is a best buy. If Kenya is to remain a leader in the race to achieving the Millennium Development and Vision 2030 goals, it is time to step up the pace. We cannot bask in our past successes before reaching our goals. We know that Kenya can press on in the lead because we have done it before in the 1970s, 1980s, and early 1990s. But we need support for the Kenya we want, and we have a call to action for those of you who are with us today. We need to ensure that contraceptive supplies are available in all healthcare facilities by increasing the family planning budget for the nation and its subregions. We need to expand information, education, communication programs for family planning so that messages about family planning services and supplies reach the men and women who can benefit. We also need to revive the community-based distribution programs to bring the family planning supplies to the people who need them. Everyone has a role to play. But most importantly, we encourage leaders at all levels to speak out in favor of family planning and publicly demonstrate their support for this important link to help Kenya achieve the MDG and Vision 2030 goals. A number of political and religious leaders have spoken out in support of family planning. His Excellency President Mwai Kibaki is a family planning champion. His statement in 1982 that family planning is African was an important cornerstone for Kenya's family planning program. It remains a key for the present and the future.
I don't put the